Hello there, my name is Crit.
Wait.
Do you hear that sound?
It is time, once again, to venture into a world of garbage.
A world filled to the brim with transphobes insisting on dying on the strangest of hills.
This is
Weird Hills, Episode 6.
LMAO, I was 6 years old and praying to God to wake up a girl. This trash just talking bullshit pulled straight out of their own ass. As for suicide games, I don't know. Their side seems intent on snorting horse paste and shitting themselves to death, so I wouldn't push that issue.
You'll never be a girl.
And you'll never be with one. Cry more, incel.
If you ever needed proof that transphobes and alt-righters never look beyond the length of their own noses, this is it. Aslil here didn't even notice the he, him, or non-binary femboy in Kane's Twitter name before dashing in to be transphobic. Burger King. Let's see what this person tweets about on his profile. A bunch of cringy boomer memes and yes, anti-COVID vaxxer memes. Jackpot!
No, the virus is mutating again. I'm on my 30-second booster. You need to get the vax or you'll die this time for sure.
Oh, and they're also racist.
It's our job as white people to realize you have white privilege, and it's your fault for being racist if you are. We need to teach each other to stop being assholes. It's your job as a straight person not to be a judgmental prick that can't fathom two people that love each other.
Who else but Redacted?
I deliberately cut out the bottom section of this charming Family Guy meme because we're not doing gamer words on this channel. Suffice to say, it's also a good sign when you can't discern between GC trolls and full-on alt-right dipshits at a first glance.
Next!
The claim is that trans people feel their gender identity doesn't match their sex. For that statement to mean anything, especially if it requires changes to laws, child transitioning, and the dismantling of single-sex provision, it needs to have some content. What is it?
No, it doesn't. We didn't have to design a metric to prove who was and was not gay in order for marriage equality to be passed.
Tell us why what you call identity is so important to you.
Tell us why what you call identity is so important to you. Tell us why what you call identity is so important to you. It's like asking, tell us why what you call a name is so important to you, or tell us why what you call interests are so important to you. Identities, like names or lists of interests, allow us to tell others about ourselves and find other people we have things in common with. They're very useful for communication as they allow us to discuss and compare our experiences. But it gets better. If we look at TJ's bio, what do we see? Musician, piano teacher, composer, linguist, Spanish and French, artist, watercolors and oils, writer, traveler. Retweets mean I'm asking a question. Identities. So many of them. Far more than most of us have in our bios, for example. While musician, linguist, artist, and the like are not gender or sexual identities, they serve a similar purpose of communicating information about TJ. And TJ could compare experiences with other writers, linguists, and artists. So if identities don't matter, TJ ought to either point us to the existence of the autist gene or clean up this bio.
What is it that these males are feeding them?
Breast milk, you fucking dumbass. Induction of lactation requires exactly one thing. Breast tissue, which people assigned male at birth also have, and which trans women have plenty of due to hormones. I'm sorry medicine and biology are hard for you. Maybe stick to easier subjects.
1. There's no milked nuts, you dumbass. 2. They take a lot of hormones to produce this milk. 3. This milk that is hormonally induced is not as much as a woman produces. 4. This is just to make a trans woman feel more like a woman, and babies are being dragged into this shit.
At this rate, I'm just going to assume you're anti-science altogether. Do you also oppose vaccinations?
I'm not anti-science. I'm fully vaxxed, and I'm not going for this gender war bullshit. Males that want to breastfeed are only doing it for their ego only because they envy real women.
Where to begin with this one? Well, no shit it would be breast milk. Do you think trans women's breasts produce absinthe? Well, if they did, every party would invite 7 of them. There would be a wait list for trans titty. For one, everyone is born with milk ducts. They develop under the influence of estrogen along with other parts of the breast, the same way they do in cis women during puberty, actually. Secondly, how do you think cis women make milk? Lactation is caused by hormones in anyone. It's just a matter of whether they produce hormones internally or take bioidentical ones. Some cis women have trouble with starting lactation. Guess what they sometimes take to help? You guessed it, hormones. Third, I don't know how much milk trans women produce offhand. It probably varies from person to person and based on how much the infant feeds. Like in cis women. Fourth, I think it's less to make anyone feel like a woman and more because babies need to eat. Babies don't care if the milk comes from a cis woman or a trans woman's tit, they just want boob milk. They want the tit liquid. This idea that a trans woman would only breastfeed out of egotistical reasons is nothing but projection. Breastfeeding can be an important part of parent-child bonding, and the idea that whether or not you should participate in that very human experience determined by your sexual characteristics at birth seems pretty damn anti-feminist to me, at least. I want to talk about this last tweet, though. I'm not anti-science, but I'm fully vaxxed, and I'm not going for this gender woo-woo bullshit. Give that science recognizes the existence of trans people and that biomedical science is the reason trans women can medically transition and even lactate. It's taking a very selective view of science to say that you aren't against science, but refuse to believe certain established scientific ideas because they don't align with your personal agenda. Next.
Now here's a classic from last year.
Yes, you are thick. How can you even speak of gay kids when prepubescent kids aren't even old enough to experience sexual attraction?
That's adorable. You don't have kids, apparently.
Are you saying that parents can sense if a kid will grow up to be gay or not?
People have eyes, Rachel.
This is known as a stereotype. It will never not be both infuriating, but also slightly funny how TERFs claim not to believe in gender stereotypes, but also constantly push them. This one says that they can tell visually whether a child will grow up to be gay. Remember that these people claim that science is on their side. What kind of scientific basis does being able to spot the gay child have exactly? There's really no way to do this from sight other than relying on homophobic stereotypes of what gay people look like, such as gender nonconformity or flamboyancy. This is of course homophobic and reinforcing gender stereotypes, which coincidentally are exactly what TERFs tend to accuse trans people of. They assert that gender nonconformity is actually a reliable indicator of sexual orientation, despite asserting that gender isn't a thing. What would make gay people more likely to be gender nonconforming than anyone else? What about bisexual people? Asexual people? This is all homophobic stereotypes and selective epistemology. Something that isn't real can be observed and is a reliable indicator of something that is? Huh? Almost like it was projection and motivated reasoning all along. Whoa.
Speaking of stereotypes,
LMAO, I bet you don't even remotely pass IRL. You type exactly like a man. I bet you're lonely and you're always the one that has to text first to hang out.
how exactly does one type exactly like a man? Last time I checked, typing works about the same regardless of your gender. You press the button on the keyboard or screen and words appear. Would I pass better if I spray painted my keyboard hot pink or something? How does this work? I'm not even sure what stereotype this is. Is there really a stereotypical way that men type? and women don't? Other than that, I can't tell what this means. Whatever it is, it's certainly not feminist to make up new gender stereotypes, or to link them to appearance. Not to mention that last part is really just a weird insult that reminds me of alpha versus beta, MRA shuttery.
Let's see how things are going in academia. Surely a philosopher will be wise.
Yes, Laurie, because you keep defaulting to me and my trans friends don't think this. Because you've written about it. Because one of the people who firebombed me when I was trying to set up a feminist party was your ex, the Stabbers.
Oh no. Is Jane Claire Jones really accusing intersexual feminist the Stabbers of firebombing? That sounds like something that would be newsworthy. Plus, since Stavers is pro-trans, if she had firebombed someone, we would have never heard the end of it from the TERFs. Accusations of firebombing would really damage someone's reputation, too. Sorry, there's a name for making false, defamatory statements that could damage someone's reputation. Libel. Of course, JCJ is unlikely to get sued because, unlike the GC movement, trans people and allies don't have massive financial backers who are ready to fund libel suits. She does have a defense, though.
Metaphor. We tried to set up a feminist party. It was destroyed here on Twitter by a concerted effort of the TRAs and the intersectional femmes like Stavers before it got off the ground for having a discussion on the inclusion of trans women. Actually firebombed by TRAs, that might have been reported somewhere, and it seems a bit extreme, so I guess she must have been using a figure of speech. Because yeah, you've decided a billion-year-old biological mechanism was created by the colonization of the Americas, and hence...
Apparently it was all a metaphor for Stavers saying mean things on Twitter. Sounds a bit extreme, and I'm not sure if a court of law would buy that excuse. I've never heard that metaphor before either. At the very least, this is an extreme exaggeration of what happened, clearly meant to imply violence on the part of Stavers. Or JCJ has no sense of perspective and consequently thinks any criticism of her is terrorism. Either way, it's a weird hill. Like the name of the show that you're listening to. It's the show!
You're not a genuine baked potato. You turned the till over when you drew the line down the custard chalkboard into cartoon villain county. And whilst there, you're paper but chips. You don't care about remote control? Stop driving. Oh look, it seems I can talk shit too.
Did they think talk shit meant say things that make absolutely no sense? I get the feeling this was meant to be an insult, but it just doesn't hold any meaning. Is this a Markov chain? I've watched TV static that made more sense than this. But just in case, let's go through this.
You're not a genuine baked potato.
True, I'm a cartoon fox on the internet, not a potato. I never claimed to be a potato.
You turned the till over when you drew the line down the custard chalkboard into cartoon villain county.
Load the spaceship with the rocket fuel. Load it with the worst. You can feel it, dude.
False. When I drew the line down the custard chalkboard, I did it in Anti-Hero County. Thank you very much. And I did not turn any tills over. It was turned over when I got there.
And whilst there, you're paper but chips. You don't care about remote control? Stop driving.
I promise I did not wallpaper any chips. Please ignore the piles of wallpaper in the corner. I use them at that time of the month. You know, when my friends come to me seeking wallpaper.
You don't care about remote control? Stop driving.
I care very much about remote control. So much, in fact, that I keep my remotes with my wallpaper collection.
Oh, look, it seems I can talk shit too.
Well, that was shit, I guess. So true?
So, let's talk about computers.
Those who criticize LGB alliance or omitting the T fail to understand there's a clash of interests. For instance, who has access to a lesbian dating site? If such a site is 40 to 50% males who identify as lesbians, who represents lesbians who object to this? Answer: at Alliance LGB.
How can dating sites make sure only women can register?
Giggle are trying.
They could use an AI that is capable of doing a Turing test. I actually think that should be possible, in this particular situation.
For those not aware, the Turing test is a thought experiment named for its creator, Alan Turing, Turing was one of the first revolutionary computer scientists, and he's most well known for his work decrypting the Enigma machine that was the Nazi Germany's message encryption method. He saved countless lives, and as a thanks, the British government found him guilty of being gay and forced him onto artificial hormones against his will, with a threat of prison if he didn't. As a result, he grew breasts and started having what we would likely classify as dysphoria today, until he died within 2 years by cyanide poisoning, likely intentional self-harm. Almost as if trans and gay liberation have always been intertwined and that cis people can experience dysphoria if they're artificially put into the state of body mismatch that trans people often experience. Coming back to the Turing test, though, it's generally considered to be the benchmark by which we would have achieved artificial intelligence. It's a theoretical test, one that might not even be fully possible, by which we can test a machine or any kind of being to assess consciousness, sapience. The first AI to pass the Turing test may have personhood and warrant human rights. A lot of thoughts on AI are very speculative, and some of the popular fiction that explores the possibility of machine sentience are pretty compelling. Consider The Synths in Fallout 4, The Robots in iRobot, Blade Runner, and Goddard, the robot dog from the award-winning psychological thriller Jimmy Neutron. But back to Earth. We see Twitter user Christine suggesting that we should aspire to AI bordering on personhood, because it's a priority to keep trans women off of women's dating apps.
Let's enjoy another banger from over at the creepy, transphobic, femcel community, shall we?
I guess we do most of our dreaming right before we wake up. Well, those are the ones we remember. So yesterday I had to use a public bathroom at a car dealer service. This is clearly where the public bathroom element of my dream came from. Also, this dealership, a major car company service and dealership complex, had a tiff working there. She was tiny, all tattooed with writing up her arms. Her voice was deepened, but not sure it put on herself for some chemical aid. No Adam's apple, of course, and just frail body. She was nice, but it made me sad. Later saw her walking in the parking lot, engaged in some deep, vulgar drama on her phone. I could tell she was not just a butch lesbian, but was trying to pass as a man. Using a man's name, too. That is the end of the real part. Here comes my dream. So, just before I woke up this morning, I had this dream nightmare where I had to use a public restroom, and the store doors only covered your face area. From the waist down, it was open, and they said they needed to make sure people weren't doing something in there. Not sure what, or who these people are who are monitoring. And I said, how the hell would you deal with your period or poop if the whole world could watch? Bad enough to pee that way. So I volunteered to stand in front of the door for another woman. Then I said loudly, imagine men were in here. And this young girl with the crazy coloured hair and queer attire stepped up. I thought to confront me, and instead declared she hated gender. I was all excited and felt she was on my side. Then I tried to use the one stall that had a door, and that was low enough not to expose your crotch. But you could see through around the sides. And then I was using it. A young man with a camera pushed the camera through the gap and was filming me wiping myself. And I was chasing after him trying to get the camera to delete it. That was how my nightmare ended. Who else could I share that with but the women over it?
I'm just... What in the... Look, until our biomedical researchers come up with a cure for having to go to the bathroom and having periods, we need sanitary and dignified facilities to relieve and take care of ourselves. And because most human beings culturally and quite possibly innately, almost instinctively, hate being observed while we are relieving our bodily waste, this is why we invented enclosed private bathrooms and stalls. If aliens watch this video, I hope it explains why these funny rooms are scattered all over our buildings. But TERFs are just out here openly admitting they're so preoccupied with bathrooms trying to rely on birth sex categorization that they have vivid dreams of seeing the junk of strangers. And they do not realize this is where their policy positions would lead us. The position of trans liberation generally is that when there's any kind of gender separation, it should purely be voluntary. That if abuse happens in a bathroom or locker room, That abuse should be assessed and those responsible held accountable, regardless of their sexes or where it happened. The position of TERFs is that the separation is necessary for safety because if someone is born with a penis smells the pee of someone born with a uterus, then he will be unable to help himself and then abuse will occur, which is basically boys will be boys logic. And TERFs have bought this narrative so hard that even when they sleep, they're having vivid mental images of privacy being invaded with the pretense of protecting privacy. The bathroom debate, TMC, will be an entire video in its own right, but for now, I have 2 points. I asked the whole team, and only one of us remembers ever seeing any other person's genitals in a bathroom, because reasonable human beings don't look into other people's stalls. The only person who remembers seeing someone else's junk in a public bathroom was the cis gay dude who went to a gay bar where that kind of voyeurism and exhibitionism was deliberately enabled and consensual between participants. Turns out that people generally don't abuse each other in bathrooms, in significant part because most people are disinclined to abuse others that overtly, and also because bathrooms are not exactly places where people can just get away with that. Someone could walk in and witness the abuse, or hear shouts from outside the bathroom. But don't worry, we'll talk later about how TERFs think the solution to the problem of abusers in bathrooms is to make sure that the abuse happens between people with the same genitals. One of the comments to this sums up the infantilizing attitude they have towards trans men.
I liked the dream apparition, Tiff. A little Cassandra speaking her inner conscience. So true, trans-identified women still face the same sex-based oppression as before. Yet, are caught in this quagmire of lies and twist their discomfort into sexist role and their normal term fault at it into a human shield for Tims.
I liked the dream you had about the dystopia because it crystallized my worldview that oppression is rooted in our bodies and not in cultural attitudes. Yeah, we know that you think that patriarchy is a biological condition of humanity and you actively seek out nonsense to reinforce that narrative, but don't you realize that trans liberation would necessarily exclude that kind of nonsense dystopia you're describing?
If you treat a trans man as male medically, you'll probably kill him.
This kills the man.
If you don't misgender trans men, you'll kill them.
There are relatively few treatments where the sex of the patient is the deciding factor in treatment, and even in cases where treatment or prognosis are sex sensitive, sex is multidimensional and may in fact be different for a trans person who's undergone medical transition than for a cis person of the same A gap. For example, if a cancer is responsive to sex hormones, then someone on HRT will need to be evaluated fundamentally differently than their same A gap identical twin who is not on HRT. Sex isn't a magical essence that doctors track as the sole indicator in these situations. They look at the whole body, and there's loads of variations, even within endosex individuals, that make sex as a binary indicator of treatment or prognosis myopic at best. This isn't even this person's only bad take. They just dropped an industrial-sized bin of them on our doorstep.
Why? Penises are sex organs, not gender organs.
Sex and gender are intrinsically linked. They are distinct but tightly related, similar to how sexuality and sexual reproduction are related but distinct. We have very naturally a lot of predispositions and elevated probabilities of liking certain traits that are positively correlated with overall health of our partner's reproductive success. And yes, this even affects gay people and those who don't want to have kids. Symmetrical features, especially symmetrical faces, are positively correlated with most people finding that person more sexually attractive. There's indication that there's a strong tendency of people to like those whose natural body odor is significantly different than their own, with the reasonable hypothesis that it's indicative of a different microbiome in our skin and pores, which in turn is an indicator of substantially different immune systems, which, for reproductively capable couples, likely provides a higher chance of the kids having a strong immune system. But hey, I know a lot of gay cis dudes who love man smell, and a lot of straight women who don't. So obviously people's sexual interest, well, very likely gravitating towards reproductively advantageous cues, are not automatically centered on baby making. All of this aside, just to say that we decide the purpose of our organs. Some speculation on what nature wants us to do with them is not binding or creating any moral obligation. You're not obligated to reproduce or even like the sexual organs you were born with. In an even more direct way, sex and gender are related. Do you think someone who has a
Pepsi
but hates having a
Pepsi
is going to enjoy using that
Pepsi
with a partner? Or someone who has a
vegetable
but hates having a
vegetable
is going to enjoy having their
vegetable
stuffed, buttered, and sauteed? Nah. Let them switch to the one that they feel more comfortable using if they damn well want to. And they will almost certainly have sex that's more enjoyable for them and their partners.
Exactly this. I identify as a woman can be any voyeur's get out of jail free card, as was recently shown in We Spa.
We Spa is a spa that specifically allows trans women in the women's sections. As with all public spas, lewd or overtly sexual conduct in the spas themselves is forbidden, and none of the claims of lewd conduct by any trans woman were substantiated, neither by the staff nor the guests. This is not evidence that being trans is a get out of accountability free card, but rather that being trans is often treated as a go to jail without even doing anything card. We'll be covering this case in more detail in a future video.
Ideally, yes. But until there aren't any predatory men, women will need sex-segregated spaces.
The notion that sexual abuse is effectively mitigated by sex segregation is just an insult to all of the victims of sexual abuse by people of the same AGAB as their victims. This is basically saying, I don't want predatory men to have access to little girls. I want them to have access to little boys. It also just flat out ignores that women can in fact be sexual abusers, and when they are, it's often overlooked, even more so than male sexual abusers, because of patriarchal assumptions of who is capable or predisposed to be abusive and predatory.
Right, but it's how safeguarding works. My bloke's fab, but I'm not going to advocate for him to be allowed to use women's loos, join women's sports teams, use women's changing rooms, or be held in a women's prison. As he's male, it doesn't matter how great he is excluded.
Men are evil rapists, except my husband. He's one of the good ones. But I wouldn't even trust him in a bathroom because he might...
Yeah, but I never said that men have to be violent. I just pointed out that as a group, they are. All men have choices.
This is biofatalism and stereotypes.
Of course it is. It's based on the gender stereotype that men are dangerous and can't help themselves, and that women are vulnerable and need chaperoning. Ultimately, very Victorian attitudes.
Yes, and again, feminists have been pointing this out for years, but sex segregation protects women, smaller and weaker than men, from dangerous men. All men must be excluded because it's not apparent until they act which men are dangerous and which are not.
You just said, yes, this is a stereotype, and also it's true.
Stereotypes can be true. It's when there are assumptions made based on a person's innate characteristics, such as race, religion, or sex, that problematic stereotyping arises.
Stereotypes are fine when I use them in service of patriarchal narratives of who is dangerous or not. It's a hell of a take.
You know nothing about me. What have I said that makes you think I am trying to uphold gender stereotypes?
Crit? What's going on? Crit? Crit!
These are in reverse chronological order, by the way, which makes this self-contradiction even worse.
How is me pointing out that men are more likely to be violent enforcing gender stereotypes?
And they ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Gender has nothing to do with sexuality, though.
I just explained.
And male people still have male socialization, even if they say they are women. What's your point?
Does this utter fool think that socialization is permanent marker on our brains? That we have no control over ourselves and can't recondition or retrain ourselves? Or that everyone has socialization that can be boiled down neatly into essentially male or female socialization?
How is it shaming to point out that nobody conforms entirely to stereotypes, therefore we are all non-binary?
For two reasons. One of being that it's analogous to saying, we're all a little bisexual, so just pick a side. Two, because gender identity is not stereotypes. They're feminine men, and they are men, including cis men and trans men. All this is typical for any extended interaction trying to reason with the TERF. They will not listen to reason, no matter how many times you repeatedly point out the flaws in their arguments and assumption. Alright, I'm done. I can't take it anymore.
And we're already getting overwhelmed with bad takes to pull apart for the next episode. Slow down, you fools. You're giving us too much hashtag content. Like us on Patreon, subscribe to our video, and consider sending us YouTubes. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some unhealthy coping mechanisms to indulge in.
How is this supposed to help anything?
I don't know.
So I'm Mikey Makes Mixtakes from CCnC. We are the ones who read this. I don't know if we're going to include this message in the video or if me and the others at CCnC are going to record our own thing for that. But like, I'm Mikey. I recorded parts of CritFacts and I read some of the tweets. The rest are read by Jerf and Mal, who are also from CCnC. We do a podcast together, and we're all on Twitter, so you should follow us there. Link's probably in the description. I can't imagine that Crit would do something like not put our links in the description.
Let's enjoy another banger from Over It. I can't.